actually more than 8 inches of rain because that's all my rain gauge does. It was overflowing this morning. Dumped it out. Well, my wife had to go to town. Her car was in the shop, so I had to get her to a friend's house to get her car. We left way too early in the morning. What happens when it rains that much, when we have saturated soil? We have a huge river down the middle of our valley. And so we tried to get the car off the farm. We couldn't. We had to circle back around in the pouring rain, wade waist deep through a raging river, get in my four-wheel drive vehicle, and I drove her to town. But I couldn't just hop on the road and go to town because roads were out everywhere. So I basically spent the day filming what happened in my... turn your phone off. What happened in my region and the difference between other farms and my farm. And we'll see a lot of things that's going on. It's this right here, the view that we see. So what I did is, this is not on a PowerPoint presentation at all. These are just raw photos that I took today. Didn't have time to organize them, so I'm just going to ram through these things. Tonight's session may go a little bit long. Ride with me. This is significant and important because I'm going to spin it back around with the context of observing your landscape. We can look at a landscape and we can tell by the shapes of the land, the shapes of these hills, tell us something about the rainfall history. The shapes of the valleys tell us a lot about where the water floods, where it goes, how deep the water goes, and so on. Then more subtle clues will give us more microsite clues on how to read our landscape. So this is a lot of observing the landscape for disturbance regime. Now, anywhere you go, you're going to want to be able to manage the water resource on your farm. Water is the #1 important nutrient. Doesn't matter, NPK, sulfur, these things can all be in deficiencies or overload. If you don't have water, we don't have plants. We don't have plants, we don't have animals. We don't live on pure pavement. So what I did is my wife and I drove to town, and when we did, it was 4 o'clock in the morning when we left because we finally got off the farm. And then as I was coming back, it finally got light enough to take these photos. And this is the highway between Viola, which is behind me. My farm is up this valley to the right. We're up on the ridge. Mastodon Valley Farm starts here and goes up the valley this way. Peter and Mo Allen live up there. So we had water over the road, driving really slow. Where did this water come from? Is it only the water that fell from the sky? No. In any landscape, the water that you see in the valley came from the uplands. So 90% of all of the flash floods that we see around the country are because the water up in the headlands, this is just a forested slopes. The uplands above it, there's agricultural fields up on top. That water has not been managed. And so it all flows down into the valleys, and as the valleys join together, the little streams turn into big streams and so on until it eventually floods roads. And this is part of the thing that blows my mind. Right here is where a stream goes by, right? If it's really big and flat next to a stream, this really big and flat area is called a floodplain. Now, a flood may actually be an act of God, but you know what? It's going to flood. And if you look at the banks on the side, you'll see these historic high water marks. You say, well, that's the 1,000-year flood. Well, you know what? It's going to flood. I don't care if it's going to do it once every 1,000 years. If it happens tomorrow and it's a 1,000-year flood and you built your house here, you're fairly well in trouble. So read the landscape and don't do things down here that are going to get washed away. Don't build your house here. Don't plant your soybeans here. This soybean field is toast. It's gone. How about put some perennials here that belong here? How about some lowlands dwelling woody crops that love to be inundated periodically, like pecan or walnut? All right, here we go. So now we're going to drive up here, and around the corner, out here is one of the most beautiful grazed pastures that I know of anywhere. Oh, it skips 2, Wayne. It's not right there. So typically there's this beautiful meandering trout stream. It's a world-class trout stream. When my wife and I went by here at 4 o'clock in the morning, and you can see evidence of it. Can you see where the water was at 4 a.m.? Well, I can. See this line along here where the vegetation has been mashed down? It's all the way mashed down. This little banking got carved over here and went all the way across here. At 4 o'clock in the morning, Only an hour before I took this photo, this was almost a solid lake, a sheet of water moving through this valley. There is a cow there laying on its back with its feet in the air. Half the herd was on this side and half the herd was on this side, looking at the water going like, duh, what happened? If you stand here and you turn around, this is facing west. If we turn around and face east, this is upstream. This is the creek that comes off of my farm. This is Camp Creek. This whole entire valley, you can see how the vegetation has been mashed down and matted and moved in our direction. Then it all dammed up behind this road, and then you see the vegetation bent this way. It all shifted and flowed this way before going under the bridge. This bridge did not wash out. Here's more evidence, this mashed down vegetation. You can see, oftentimes, and you'll see in these pictures, you'll see debris that had been washed downstream that'll be marking the high water mark. So you can go someplace in the fall, for example, and you look around and say, oh yeah, wow, there's been a heck of a flood here within the past year or two, because sometimes that stuff hanging up high in the brush, it gets dried out and it doesn't decay. So you'll see the high water mark with, you know, tufts of debris hanging up in the trees, and you'll know where the flood was. Simple observation. This is what, you know, happens to parts of the road. So we're basically driving up to my farm. We go through this crack in the rocks here. We're in bluff country. It's canyon land more than hills and valleys. So flat tableland on top, flat valleys in the bottom, steep hillsides in between. So as we go up here, can you see the evidence here of where the water had flowed across the road? At one point in time, the water came through here and was completely across the road that way and completely across the road, and we see the vegetation line and see how the sand pile has been carved all the way across here. So that's about 56 feet going across the highway, another 56, so 150 feet wide, raging river carved out the side of the road. This is skipping too fast. Well, so now what we've done is we've taken a right to turn up to my farm. This is a neighboring cornfield. Look what happens in annual cropland. In annual cropland, when the rain hits the bare soil, the soil particles get mixed with the rain, it settles out. The finest particles stay in suspension in the water. The finest particles are clay particles. The coarser material settles out, and then it all washes away. So all of the soil is moving. There's fine particles of soil washing away with this. As more and more water accumulates in the valley, the stream gets larger and larger, faster, and then it picks up more and more heavier material. And then much of the erosion is caused by scouring from debris, from rocks and pebbles and gravel that are being carried with it. You can see how it roared all the way through this field here, and it spread all the way across. And I don't know why this little center part was raised a little bit. It had gone around this way, and it came around this way. And then it got to the bottom of the hill. And what's really interesting about this is just a generic picture to you guys. You know, who gives a rip, right? Well, if we went back here, this water right here shoots across the road right here. So this is all coming from that cornfield. This is how wide that stream was. This little piece right here came from the ditch on the side of the road. So this came from an annual crop field cornfield. This came from a ditch on the side of the road. Now look at this place over here. That's all these trees and whatnot. Well, that happens to be New Forest Farm. And this happens to be a valley coming from New Forest Farm. All of New Forest Farm is patterned based on the keyline system, but modified. It has terraces or swales and burns, if you want to call them that, channels and mound to catch the water, spread it out, slow it down, soak it in, hold a bunch in a bunch of ponds. And look, there's nothing coming out of this valley. This is 20 acres worth of land. It got the same amount of water as this stuff did. It was 8 inches last night, 2.5 during the day. It's still raining right now. They're expecting another 3 to 5 inches the rest of tonight. So this is our croquet club, where we play croquet on Friday nights, the Kickapoo Valley Croquet Club, and gravel pit. And once again, look at this. No water coming off the farm, no water coming off the farm. Why doesn't New Forest Farm shed water like these other annual crop farms do? Here's the road. This is looking up the road now. This is coming from the cornfield, all the debris that's washed across. All of our fences on the downhill side were washed out from the neighbor's water. I still have 2 pigs missing. There's not a single cow on the farm right But look at this. This is lush. This is green. There's no problems over here. This is primarily on this section right over here. This is maple, sugar maple that we planted, hybrid poplar for timber, Korean pine for pine nuts, and chestnuts and hazels. And so then we turn around looking back down the road, and we see how this is where the road ditch carved and went left on the croquet court, and this is where the cornfield bled this way. This now is New Forest Farm. This is a radically different scene than something like this or the cornfield with water running down it. And I'm going to briefly cut out to a PowerPoint, and I'm going to fly through this because I do not have time to go through an entire water management system. What Jeffrey or Wayne can do will find my schedule for this fall. I'm about to go into my big teaching and install, doing a lot of design and install projects this fall. We will be doing some course on the water management system, which is an adaptation of the keyline design system that we're calling the master line system for very specific reasons. This farm that you see was designed according to the master line system because the simple keyline geometry did not work on this landform. This landform is too complex to follow, to dogmatically follow the true keyline methodology. Why didn't that slide advance? We'll do it this way. Come on. All right, Wayne. Oh, there we go. Of course, I got my inspiration from tree drops, permaculture. It was in the Permaculture Designer's Manual that I saw these pictures, and it really caught my attention way before we ever bought the farm. That if we do just change our cultivation pattern, start up here, uphill in the watershed, and just kind of steer slightly downhill going toward the ridge, we can actually take water from the valley and move it to the ridge. That is a real trick, and it twists people's mind around. They say you can't make water go uphill. Well, we're not making it go uphill. We're starting high in the watershed down in the valley, and then we're going to move slightly downhill as we go across the face of that ridge. So yes, we go to the top of the ridge, but this is a downhill direction. And I looked at these patterns. I said, that's brilliant. I've got to do that on my land when I get my land. And then I also saw this in the Permaculture Designer's Manual based on the keyline design system. And what I noticed here is if you look at these lines with arrows, look at this line right here where this water, this is a contour. All these lines are at the same elevation. It starts at that line, it goes down, slope, downhill, 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 and it fills a pond. Well, then it overflows, it goes downhill, 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 and it fills another pond. Downhill, downhill, downhill. So what we just did is we took water that was going to go down this valley, and we now put it over in this valley, and we went across 1, 2, 3 different ridges. Like, holy crap, that's miraculous. This line right here is what we're calling the master line. Because if you put in one line that changes the whole total hydrology of your system and the water pattern, that is the master line. It's the key to this whole system of how the water is going to move, but I can't call it a key line because Darren Doherty's going to get snotty. And it's not officially a key line. That's the master line that changes the hydrology, and it doesn't have to be only in this pattern. You can move that water wherever you want. You can move it here, you can take it from here and move it there. How you change the water on your property is up to you. What are your goals? What are you trying to accomplish? What are the crops you're trying to grow? What's the livestock you're trying to manage? Are you in a low rainfall area, high rainfall area? Do you need to concentrate water if you're like in Nevada? Or do you need to spread water out if you're in Vermont, for example? Or quite the opposite. What if you're in the Netherlands? You need to get that water away from your property. Now we're talking ditches and drainage instead of rehydration of the landscape. I can't believe there's people who actually live below sea level, and then they get it in their mind to go buy another piece of real estate. So they go to another country and buy another piece of property below sea level. That's ridiculous, but everybody's different. This was a system that, if you look at this landform up top, the water that lands here, it could be like 1 inch of rain falls everywhere, right? So everything gets 1 inch of rain. Well, it's not all that case, because what happens is some of it doesn't soak in and it starts to flow, and it moves down, and this 1 inch adds to this 1 inch, to this one, to this one, to this one. By the time it gets down here, this valley may have gotten like 4 feet of water because it flowed off the top. This is exactly the case that happened in the photographs I just showed. It'll be the case in the photos I'll show subsequently, is that the water up here was not managed. It was allowed to escape, which means that that water will never be available here for use again to water crops, trees, animals, humans, etc. So if we design a system based on keyline or master line or USDA, contour farming, terraces, we can actually make the water zigzag back and forth across that landscape a zillion times if we want to. When it finally gets to the bottom, now let's have a windmill that pumps it back up to the top, and we just use the same water over and over and over again. I've had a goal on my farm for the past 20 years. No water will leave my farm over the surface. It's got to go transpire through a plant, come out in some animal's breath, go out in an animal's body, leave in the form of fruit, alcoholic beverage and cider, or go soak through the ground and come out as a spring or a stream, not as overland flood flow. This is Yeoman's property. This is the book P.A. Yeomans wrote, Water for Every Farm. I could go to an audience of 3,000 people and ask how many people have read this, and you'll have maybe 1% of the people in that audience have read that. And I say, okay, of those of you who have picked this up and started to read it, how many of you finished? Out of the people who've picked it up, maybe 10% have finished. Out of the 10% that have finished, I ask, okay, how many of you understand this? Maybe 10% understand it or claim to understand it. Well then, okay, of you 10 that claim to understand it, how many of you guys have been doing this for the past 20 years and it goes down to 1 or 2 people? There's maybe a handful of people on the planet who've been working with this set of techniques for a career. And what's fascinating about it is we read this book, and theoretically it's written in English. It's very difficult to read because it's not exactly in the kind of English that I learned. Of course, I learned Yank or some kind of stupid language like that. Every one of us who claims to understand this and have worked with this for a period of years all do it differently. Why? Well, I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that the land is different everywhere, and it doesn't behave exactly in a purist codified way like Yeomans said it did. And in writing my own book on water management, I learned something fascinating. I don't know if you guys can see my hand, but if we have a main ridge going across our hand, we have primary ridges and primary valleys. This is a first order stream according to hydrology. A first order stream that meets another first order stream, like this, now becomes a second order stream. 2 second order streams that meet become a third order stream. Well, Yeomans says that you only have primary valleys and main valleys. Well, sometimes you'll have this weird anomaly that there's a secondary valley. It's like one sentence in his book says that. What I found out is Australia is the hydrologically simplest continent on the planet. On Australia, there is no stream more complex than a third order stream. Like this little primary valley meets this primary valley. These 2 secondary valleys come together and make a main valley. That's it. Well, I found myself in 1985 walking around my farm with this book, which was very difficult to get back then before the internet, a small, out-of-print book on agriculture from Australia. It took months for me to find it finally. I got it, and I'm reading it, and I'm following it to the letter, and the landscape did not behave how this book told me that it would behave. Recently, Darren Doherty and this guy, Georgi Pavlov, put out a booklet on understanding the geometry of keyline. And even in Pavlov's book, signed by Darren Doherty, he's got like 1 or 2 sentences. I said, oh yeah, every once in a while you run into this little thing called a landscape anomaly. Well, you know what? I found myself in the upper headwaters of the Mississippi River, which is the most complex river system on the planet. It's a 14th order stream. It's so convoluted and so complex that keyline design barely covers it at all. In very specific, very simple circumstances, if you follow the keyline cultivation pattern, it'll work. So most of the cases I've ever used, attempted to apply keyline geometry to a landscape, the patterning, I find that the land doesn't work, and so I adjust. Twice in 20 years, I've found landscapes where the farm laid out perfectly, so it's a super easy way to start. I still start according to finding a key point and setting a key line, which is a contour line from that key point. This is Yeoman's own farm, same amount of rain as Reno, Nevada, and was purchased as rubbish land. There's a lot of cool YouTube videos on this place, all black and white videos when he first got started. It's like broken shale, horrible stuff. You'd hardly call it soil. It was purchased in the 1950s, and it was sold back in 2007 for $52,000 an acre for development. And the thing is that site held enough water in place for 1,200 households already. No reservoirs needed. And it was done as part of the profitable development of this property as an agricultural property. Yeoman's also wrote a book on designing water from the cities, and I was talking with my farm crew today. It's like, think about how stupid human race is in that all of our cities, even like in Tucson, Arizona, for example, our cities are designed, our landscapes are designed, our rural areas are designed to take the water and channel it and make it go away as quickly as possible, as if it's some kind of nuisance. We've got gutters on our roof to get it to a pipe, to get it to a gutter on the side of the road, to get it to a storm sewer, to put it in a concrete channel and get it the hell out of here. Think about Los Angeles, California, when it rains an inch. They've got raging torrents. Turn that off. Raging torrents going down these concrete channels, so they have hundreds of millions of gallons of fresh water flowing out to sea. And then they have water shortages. They have to pipe water in from Colorado. It's insanity. We need to redesign our agricultural land, our suburban land, our urban land, etc. One of the things that really caught my attention with the Yeoman's book, Water for Every Farm, was that our goal is to create topsoil. And being a kid who learned composting from my dad, a biodynamic gardener, I learned it takes eons, geological eons, to create soil, because you have to keep making this compost. You rot this stuff and you throw the compost on the surface. You got a couple of little crumbs. It's going to take 1,000,000 years to build topsoil. But what Yeoman's claimed is that what we're going to do is we're going to develop deep biologically fertile soil. We're going to take the subsoil and turn that into topsoil. And I said, I'm going to give this a try. It sounds like this guy's hallucinating, but I'm going to give that a try, because what if he's right? So what we're going to do, look up top here, we're going to convert the subsoil into topsoil. We need roots in the ground, we need airspace, we need water, and we need decomposition. When we get all those things, roots are basically carbon that the plant just pumped down into the soil. And if those roots either die or they exude sugars into the soil, all those are carbon compounds that are now in the soil. They decay and they turn black. You can turn the subsoil into topsoil. This is my farm, and a report came out. Some university did research with Darren Doherty and Abe Collins, and said that, guess what? Keyline design does not work. You do not improve the soil using keyline design at all. See, NPK before keyline, NPK after keyline, no difference. Does not work. I had just recently got, so this was 7 years ago, a new wind turbine, and I climbed up the tower. I only dared to go up 80 out of the 100 feet because it was moving back and forth. And I was bummed out. It's like, well, I know it makes rich, fertile soil. I know it does, because I used to have really red, sticky clay soil. And you look at all the soil on my neighbor's farm, all this red, sticky clay. And then you look at the farm road, all this red, sticky clay, and it's like, well, wait a minute. How is it that this field here, with swales and berms and the water spreads out instead of concentrating in the valley, the water spreads out. I'm using extensive cover crops and plow downs and subsoiling, sometimes with a yeoman's plow. This soil, by actively farming it, has turned into topsoil. This soil, by not using it at all, stays as the red clay. It's like, wow, there's a picture right there that we have turned red clay into topsoil in this case, probably 12, 13 years. So 7 minus 21. So, yeah. And this is a sample that a USDA guy from Connecticut came and dug. We did cores, and in the ag land over here, we had about 8 inches of topsoil that we created. In the road here, we basically have a little crumb of organic matter on a old horizon. Well, this is the master line swale on my farm here. This is what sets the water management pattern for the whole entire farm. Is patterned off of this line. It's the master. Just below here, where we've been grazing, so it's got water management, lots of extra soakage. It's had deep time ripping with a subsoiler. and grazing perennial pasture. This was 30 inches deep of topsoil where it was formerly red clay. This really happened to me. Now, I don't care if the NPK in this is no better than the NPK in that. I would much rather farm in this black stuff than in this red stuff over here, because this stuff you can't even scrape it off your boots. So this is what is in part because of managing our water resource. We have way more water available to our plants in this system over here. One, because of the berms and swales and subsoiling, and two, just because of the increase in organic matter. A 1% increase in soil organic matter will store an extra 2 swimming pools per acre. So think about now here in New Forest Farm, Southwest Wisconsin, we just got, almost a foot of rain, a third of a meter overnight. We can store 2, 3, 4, 5, 7 times the amount of water that we could have. We can store so much more water here than we could in there. I wrote about it in a book. In this book, I punted when it came to the water management chapter simply because there's so much that needs to be addressed that I could not do it in one chapter. So my follow-up book to this is on water management. And because it is so complex and so fascinating to me, it keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger and more complex. I'll get to it. I really will, I promise. So back to the simple key line. What you do is if you're looking at a map, you'll have wide contours, then all of a sudden they get narrower. Right where they get narrower, that means that from like a valley form to like a head wall of the valley. So this is kind of shallow, going up shallow. Now it's getting steeper. So it's right here. It corresponds to the web in your fingers, if you can see me on my webcam. So from the key line, or the key point, you make a contour line. So it goes out, and just before it starts turning around the corner that way, you stop. Then you go out this way, and just before it starts going around, you stop. That's the key line. And then the next slide will show, it flips the picture around, it'll show that when you go ahead and now till your fields parallel to this key line downward, what will end up happening is the water will naturally flow from the valley toward the ridge. And that is a true miracle that Yeomans discovered. That's the miracle of keyline geometry. Well, then what you do is you go to the lowest practical ridge on your farm, and you just make a contour along this low ridge. Now you go parallel up to the ridge, this ridge reference contour here, and what will end up happening is all your patterns will now they'll now cause the water to flow from the valleys to the ridges. That's a bloody miracle. And I've actually worked with 2 properties where it actually worked. Because in my part of the world and any other parts of the world that I've been to, the landforms are more complex than this. This just shows that in the valley, parallel down, even if you're just changing your tillage pattern, it will make the water flow from the valley toward the ridge. If you till from the ridge up, it will make the water flow from here out towards the ridge, and that's brilliant. We now water the ridges. The ridges are usually the driest, stoniest parts of your property, and now they're going to get more water. Well, as you move up the ridge, what will happen is now these curves get so tight that you can't really move your equipment here. So you just kind of pull back until it's smooth again. You do it smooth until it gets too tight, and then you pull back and do this and keep repeating this up the ridge. Neither Yeomans nor Mollison addressed what to do in these little things right here. Now, if you look at your fingernails, and you see underneath your fingernail that little half moon thing right there, that kind of corresponds to that. What I've ended up doing with the master line system is instead of hoping that the landscape falls into this regular pattern, we'll go to the key point, lay out a key line, we'll do a couple of parallels down and see if it actually works. If it actually does, if these lines do actually go downhill from the valley toward the ridge, we'll stick with that because key line works. Most of the case, it doesn't. So what I'll do is my first parallel, I automatically pitch it downhill at about a 1% slope. And we'll get into the details of why later. And what ended up happening is that corrects 90% of the problems. You'll make one single line. You don't have to have 2 separate cultivation patterns. It'll start at the key point and go down towards the ridge. Start at the key point, go down towards the ridge. We just preset it and say, you will work. Well, then we go parallel down, and parallel down, and then parallel up. As soon as the geometry doesn't work, we stop and we reset it. And what we end up having is these shapes on the ridge, just like with the keyline pattern, And then what we also have is we'll have shapes like that in the valleys. And so oftentimes we'll couple the valleys. We'll make a little pond in the valley, and then a little pond out on the ridge. So the valley pond will fill and flood. We'll send it out here, and we'll put it out to a shallow ridge pond with a level sill at the end here. So now the water sheets off the ridge. One of the things is, where's the key point in this landscape? Well, this could be one of them, and so could that one, and so could that one, and so could that one. These are all kind of technically, maybe possibly key points if you look at a contour map. If you run a key line off any one of those, a contour off any one of those, the geometry does not work. So that's where I started. This is New Forest Farm 20 years ago. No, not 20 years ago because my building's there. Never mind. That was only maybe 10 years ago. So every property has a sweet spot. I've gotten in a lot of trouble for saying that, but every property does have a sweet spot. There is a master line on that property. And Yeoman's even said it here, I think this is page 139. A principal consideration is that the final result should be 2 or more interconnected storages, ponds, in which the overflow from the highest dam is caught by the water collecting channel and directed to the next lower dam, and so on, throughout the entire chain of dams. So what you've got is you've got the whole entire water management strategy on the farm is unified by this one master line. Yeoman said so right here. Well, then what he said, you know what, guess what? And this is where he goes through all this trouble about talking about what keyline geometry is. And then he says, if on occasion it doesn't work, wing it, adjust it, up or down by a few meters or feet or so. So wait a minute, why did he go through all these pages trying to describe to us the importance of keyline geometry, and then with one sentence says, wing it? So what I've done is I've figured out a very simple, systematized method of winging it that works. And what it does is it will follow keyline geometry, mostly, and more significantly for us in the U.S., not so elsewhere, it complies with USDA agricultural codes, rules, and regulations. This right here has a blessing. It's a keyline design system. Bill Mollison's in his book. This is a master line right here. That's the master line of this system right here. Change the whole hydrology, and then you pattern off of that line the rest of the landscape. And if the rest of the landscape doesn't comply with keyline geometry, adjust it. That's the whole point. USDA code 330, contour farming. Listen to this. We're going to use ridges and furrows. What? Ridges and furrows. Huh, that sounds to me like a swale and a berm. Caused by tillage and other operations to change the direction of the water. Instead of going down the slope, we're going to go around the hill slope. So the USDA is telling us to do this. We want to do it to, reduce erosion, reduce transport of sediment, et cetera, increase water infiltration. This is how you find it down the bottom. American farmers, we have to obey this code. It tells us the margins of error within which we have to work. Piece of cake. Then we use terraces, an earth embankment, or a combination ridge and channel. Hello, can you say swale and berm? I've gotten a lot of heat for using the term swale. I'll use them almost everywhere that it's appropriate. They may not be appropriate everywhere. What is your context? What are the goals that you're trying to accomplish? If you're in the USA, guess what? It's best management practices. We're going to reduce erosion, sediment content, runoff. Anywhere where these issues are going on, these are useful and helpful. We need to use instruments. Laser levels are the most accurate on the ground. Yes, you can get a GPS that's as accurate as a laser level for $25,000, $30,000. You can get one of these or a handful of these. Get these for like $400 or $500 at a Home Depot. They'll last a good long time. And what you look at, the reason why we need these, see these orange flags going right through here? And are they going downhill, uphill, or are they perfectly on contour? And I'm only taking 3 answers. Those are actually going downhill at a 1% slope. From here to here is a 1 foot drop over 100 feet, 1 foot drop over 100 feet, 1 foot drop, but it looks like it's going uphill. The reason why this optical illusion happens is we see a slope going this way. We see a slope going this way. We see a field edge going this way. We may see fences and roads, and our mind brain kind of figures out a way for us to be able to walk across this landscape as we're bobbing up and down and our eyes are wiggling in our head so we don't get dizzy and fall over. Our organism is good enough at doing that. We are not good enough to make a slope at 1% or at 0%, unless we get really well trained at it, and then we follow up and verify with this. All of this, is on other webinars that I do. This will be more on the water management stuff, but I just want to mention that we want to design to be able to handle our catastrophic rain event. If we don't design for a mega event, and we get a mega event, we can have a catastrophic failure. We don't want that. You got clay soils, you can have a swale deeper, steeper sides. Sandy soils need to be wider so they don't fill in so quick. And then we need to measure the water infiltration rate, understand the infiltration rate, because our capacity of our ponds and our outlet and all the swales plus infiltration has to be able to intercept the water falling on that catchment area, whatever the area is where the rain is falling on. Then you have to add any inflow from off the farm. Follow the USDA rule book. It's all in there. I don't have to go over it tonight. And then we modify what's in there within their tolerances in order to accomplish our objectives. If you got a slope like this that's perfectly on contour, but we want the water to go to my right, we just tip it 1%. We're still within our 2% margin of error, and we just measured it with a laser level. Well, we could also tip it 1% that way. We're still in our margin of error, but what's the result on the land? The result on the land is radically different because all the water now goes that way, or all the water goes this way, or it's perfectly level and it shoots across. All within tolerances, 3 radically different objectives. And actually, one of the things about keyline geometry, if you go to a key point, key line parallel down, keyline reference, ridge reference parallel up, you basically have 9 different possibilities from here, using this as a key point. This is a ridge and this is a ridge. Whereas if you modify that master line, there are 739 different possible geometric combinations just by adjusting 1% of any leg on any line. And I'll go into that at another webinar. I just wanted to show you some stuff. Now, we're going to reference this photograph a lot because look at this pattern here. What happens here is this ditch on the side of the road used to fly right by the farm, and it would enter right about here. This 40 acres here all flows through here, hits the ditch on the opposite side of the road, flows over, hits a culvert, and comes in over here. So we have all of this field here that's now ditched onto the road that goes this way. So there's 40 acres and 40 acres all coming in through this ditch. Well, then there's another 40 acres over here that comes in through this ditch onto my property. So that's 120 acres of water coming roaring across my property. And there's big, huge erosion cuts here and here caused by that off-farm water. Well, then this is a 60-acre field, and there's another 20 acre over here. So there's 80 acres that now come this way and roaring through the center of my farm. So 120 plus 80 is 200 acres. Oh, and did I mention this 80 that comes down this way? So 280 acres of water comes pouring onto this property, and before we did any water management, it would just roar down these valleys and go right down this way, and it's a flash flood like we'll be seeing in the other photos. But we'll stay on this. We'll come back to this afterwards and go back to these photos. So where this picture is right here, this is standing in this little clearing looking down this valley. We have just had 10 inches of rain. There's water hemorrhaging off of these farms and roaring down the valley here, and going through this way. I've never bothered to intercept that flow because it's 120 acres of land. That's a significant constructed thing that I'd have to do in order to manage that water. And it makes a raging torrent. And the same with this 100 acres. I've never bothered to manage that because it was too big for my confidence. I'm more confident now. As soon as I get the money for the dozer, I'll do it. So this water is not coming from my farm. It's coming from off the farm. This valley is from my farm. Where's the water? This is a culvert that goes onto the road and all goes down this way. So we're now walking east along the road. You can see this other ditch comes roaring down. There is a pond here that I excavated, and it still flows over. Why isn't there water running off of my farm? Because of all the berms and swales. This is looking up that road, that half a mile up the road. The ditch used to come right by here, put a driveway in the way, And they wanted to give me a culvert so I could send it right through on the ditch. I said, no, 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 I want to steer it onto my farm. I want this additional 100 acres of water. So in our area, if we get 3 feet of rain on 100 acres, I now have 300 extra acres of water that I can draw from. So I now have essentially 9 feet of rain that I can work with, I pull onto my farm. This is the only one that I really manage at all. So it comes around that corner, settles at this pond, goes underneath the road, or the driveway, some puddles on the driveway, and goes into another pond here. And then we went down the road. We decided to get off the ridge. This is what happens on the neighbors' farms. It's 4 feet deep. There was a 4-foot culvert here, as wide as the road, that moved downstream about a quarter of a mile. So we took a left because we couldn't cross that part of the road. I'm just trying to get off the ridge here, and then we go look at the neighbor's fields and look at all the erosion. This guy is going to actually probably get extra money from the federal government to help correct his erosion. It's almost insanity. And let's see if this video plays. American agriculture at its finest. This is USDA contour farming. Plowed of ground, nice little rain on a slope. Well, of course, we want to deal with all of this erosion, so instead of not plowing on steep hillsides, instead of having terraces or swales, or controlling the water in the headlands, let's put a pond at the bottom where it's totally useless for any irrigation or livestock watering, where it would have to be pumped back up. The erosion already happens before you ever catch it in that ridiculous pond. Look at all the scum, the green algae in there from all the nitrates, the extra fertilizer running off in that pond. Gotta love it. Gotta love it. Annual agriculture at its best. They do this year after year after year, and all that water runs down the valleys, washes out the roads. So we tried to go up over another ridge and see where my knee is. The ditch on the side of the road eroded up to my knee. So we kind of drive up on this little shelf. I wasn't scared. I'm using my big, huge 4-wheel drive. My Volkswagen Jetta is still stranded on the farm right now. I will not be driving it. So then we came to this situation here. This culvert is radically undersized. Well, they didn't design it around, the 100-year flood. They designed it around this the 25-year flood, because that's statistically most likely to happen. Excuse me, the 100-year flood does happen. And if you get 2 of them in a row, you're hosed because you keep washing the road out. Know what they've done? This afternoon, I was watching the front end loaders on this road. They're just filling this in with gravel so the steers water back through the pipe again. They have not corrected anything. The water upstream is not managed, and they will not be able to manage the next big flow that comes through. And guess what? It will happen. But in the landscape, look at some things here. See all this vegetation is matted and laid down? This is the high water mark, and it actually got so high that this is the water that went down to the right and carved out the ditch on the right-hand side of the road. Logs. I mean, who's parking logs on the side of the road? Notice the matted grass. The highway actually ended up being the river for a point in time, and then the water shifted back on, and it was all the way up here. The edge of this was the river, and the water flowing down. You can see more logs in there. A ditch on the side of the road. How you like the crack in my windshield? Now we're driving up the road. I want you to pay attention to this. This is now going up the ridge. My farm is up the road that way, the croquet court on the right. See where this vegetation is matted across here, and then you see where the vegetation is matted across here. This whole entire road was the river, about 4 feet deep, roaring down 5 o'clock this morning. This this culvert, is like a 6-foot culvert. This is almost completely washed out. It didn't completely wash out. This is a gravel pit over there. Just amazing volumes of water. All happened, overnight, and the stream just flows away lightning fast. That's why they call them flash floods. Whenever there were cracks in the road, water would come in, get into the crack in the road, and erode the gravel underneath. And sometimes the road would collapse into the hole. Other times it would pick up sheets of the pavement and float the sheets of the pavement down the road. This it fascinates me because at the croquet court I planted a hedge of hazelnuts. They're in the middle of the flood flow. There's a hazelnut brush. They don't care. Now let's look at some evidence. How deep was this water? Another 2 feet deep. Another place where the water came across the road. Now this gal is not tall. She's maybe 5'6", and you can see where the debris line is up at about chest high for her, and it comes across this way. And here's where the matted grass is, and it causes big, huge waterfall over the edge of the road. We had a blast today, even though we still have 2 missing pigs. And all the debris on the road. The road was the river for a while. Now this is what the neighborhood looks like. This is what happens when you don't manage your water. Oh, honey, we got water in the basement. Why don't you start that sump pump? A little 6-inch pipe is not going to handle these kind of water flows. We need to design our systems appropriately. If you're going to use a small technique like this, use lots of small techniques up high in the landscape so we prevent the big slug coming down like this in the bottom of the valley. Control it up high, subdivide it up high, just more erosion and debris shots. Here's a USDA flood control structure. These were all put in the 60s. I'll run this video for a second so you just listen to what it says. This is a flood control structure made back in the 1960s. A number of these are put in place around these counties in southwest Wisconsin. Most of them are close to failure in age. And they're a little bit inappropriately located in that they're put a little too far down in the landscape. If we had put more smaller structures further upstream, we could catch more of the water before it ever got this catastrophic. Behind this structure, the pond is increasing in depth because, as you can see, the culvert going through that dam is spilling as fast as it possibly can. Over on the right, we'll see the spillway, and up behind the spillway you can see the impounded water. This does indeed meter how much water will flow on the downstream side of it. But as this approaches capacity, 60-year-old earthen structure, it's entirely possible that these will blow out. Several of them have blown out in these counties in the past few years. So this is a classic flood control structure, earthen dam with a through pipe and a spillway. So what this flood control structure does is where that pipe is coming out, that's a 4-foot diameter concrete pipe. That's a steady flow, high volume, but it's a steady flow, and so the places downstream won't experience this big pulse of all this slug of water roaring down the valley. So all that water slugs down here, gets caught behind this dam, and then slowly gets metered out that way. However, if we had caught all the water up high, we never would have had this impoundment down in the landscape. And if we had all of the properties up top, T-line or master line designed, the water would not reach here. You already saw some of the pictures from the farm. There's not any water coming from my property. It's only going through my property if it came from somebody else. Our place does not overflow rain, even in 10 inches of rain. So this is the impoundment behind it. There are 3 houses up here that are completely cut off right now. We tried going in from that side, we tried coming in from this side, and we tried coming in that side. They're completely cut off in this lake. And there was only about, this is a spillway here. If you make a spillway, you can make it trapezoidal in shape with longer taper on the wall. So as it gets higher, instead of the volume getting faster, the velocity getting faster, it spreads out and spreads out and spreads out. So eventually you're going across the whole top of the dam thin. So you could make the spillway a little bit less catastrophic. 2 more feet of water in here, and that thing is over top and it's going to flood out. It may be discharging faster than it's gaining right now because you see it's already gone down. You see the evidence of the water here. They tried to see how far they can go, but these fence posts go completely underwater further upstream. Then we'd be driving down the road and randomly there'd be this gushing water. You see that kind of oh, pretty waterfall. Bridges out, road closed. You see my screen where it said, "Mark, are you having fun yet?" So this is somebody's soybean field getting totally covered with rocks. How are you going to deal with that? Now back to reading the landscape and observing the landscape. Now this is a willow tree. If you have a piece of property that has willow trees on it, one of the things you can observe and you can know a lot about your landscape just by understanding that, wow, there's willow trees here. There must be enough water to support willows. There will be a temperature range between this and this because they won't be able to tolerate it any hotter than this. They can tolerate it very cold, but not any hotter than that. They like lots of water. They also have a tendency to root from any part of them that touches the ground. And if you go ahead and somehow bend it this way, why did this willow tree get bent? Because there was water from here to here, almost chest deep on me. It went right across here. A raging river bent this tree over. What will happen next year and years after is these will now shoot straight up. And so you see this long tilted trunk and these shoots going up. So you may end up seeing a gigantic tree with shoots going up, and you say, oh wow, that's a willow tree that's bent like this. That means at some point in time when that tree was little, there was a massive flood that went through here. Don't just go, huh, neat. You say, no. This is a place that floods 4 feet deep, raging river, and will dump rocks all over your field. This is a genuine site observation. This is a neighbor of mine. They just harvested their corn for silage. Their cornfield is now a lake. They were very fortunate they got the corn off. So we decided we're trying to get to town. So we're up behind this. Our farm is behind this. And so we're driving along the roads, just checking out the scene. We can't get to town. There's another road out, another bridge out. Then we got to like the main valley. Oh my gosh. How's that for a barn? Here's the lane. You see the roads going right in. All of this, 100% of all of this is entirely preventable. And it's preventable with the farmer doing some simple land shaping techniques with equipment they already have, and it helps their farm to be more profitable because it drought proofs them and it helps prevent this kind of catastrophic flooding. Nice place to put your shed. I wonder if their lawnmower is going to start. So, then you get to this crazy kind of stuff. And what's amazing, these rocks just pile up all over the place. A lot of people said, oh yeah, this erosion has taken place over eons of time. Well, sometimes erosion took place in a matter of hours. A lot of our landscapes are formed by massive disturbance events that are this catastrophic and change the character of this place forever. So now you've got a little bit of a look at what the neighborhood looks like around me. Now let's kind of go back to my farm and see what we see there. You don't see this kind of stuff. Here we go. Wait a minute. I thought we were in a place that has all this kind of rain. Why doesn't it look like that? Well, this is around my cider mill building. If we go back here again, we're standing right here. This whole building, I've got the arrow around, is ditched around the building. So all of this land here will sheet across here and get caught in a swale that brings it around that way. And then it enters into this little pond here. So this, the road water here goes into this pond. It goes through into that pond, and it meets with all this water here. So we've got 80 plus 10. So there's 90 acres of water that goes through this system right here, and then gets distributed out across here. Back to photographs. So this now flows that way. Instead of going down the valley, show where that is over here. Instead of all this water going and leaving my farm, it's now going to go around in that way. I'm going to slow it down, spread it out, soak it in. So it comes around the building, goes this way into the swale that we saw previously, and then it goes that way. What am I looking at? Just looking at, okay, this is actually the septic mound. It goes around the septic mound because we want to drain the septic mound. We don't want the septic mound to be wet. There's a little pond here, so the concrete slabs drains down this little pond. So the swale goes around the barn that way, comes around this way, around here, and it catches this stuff, adds to this, and it continues to go around to that pond. It comes around. So once it gets over here, I think the next picture shows it comes out here, goes through this culvert and collects in this pond. This pond is like the distributor for 80 acres of road water and another 10 acres up front that all come through here. And then this distributes it through a swale system that goes that way. And here's where that pond is right in here. You can't really see it because I don't mow in there because it's too steep and deep. I just let the brush grow up. Here's a key point pond. This is the point around which I designed the whole entire farm, and I'll go to it over here on this screen. So previously what we looked at is here's the building, the water that used to go zip here. Instead of adding this water to this valley, we now take it out, catch it, slow it down, and then it adds this 90 to it, and then it spreads back out to this ridge, and out on this ridge, it sheets across this ridge, and it cascades out on this ridge instead of going down the valley. Well, the slide that I was on right now, this point right here is the point around which the whole entire water management system on the farm is designed. This water here goes out around here and it sheets across this ridge. It ties in with this water here, but I've never connected it because I'd have to make a large structure to get that water to flow that way. So back to this one. But notice the difference. Where's all the swamp water? Where's the raging torrent? We've captured it. We've stored it in a pond. So let's go back to this. Here's the pond. It's going to exit this way in a swale and exit that way in a swale. Well, where's this monster Sepp-Holzer ditch? Well, you don't really need it. The more you put in the landscape, the closer together they are, the shallower they need to be. So this is only like 60 feet. And then just a little ditch of 2 bottom plows, so 14 inches wide, 8 inches deep, and then a mound on the downhill side. And then you can see there's repeated patterns down the slope. There's a pond here, pond here, pond. I've walked through 3 of them to show how the water's moved through the system. So it spreads to the left, spreads to the right, and this water that used to go 600 feet down the valley, drop 100 feet, had all the other water to it, was massively erosive. There's erosion gullies still left over, scars from 20 years ago, from when this used to be plowed ground. This now goes out the ridge 1,200 feet and forms a sheet around the corner. It makes the end of this ridge wet. The driest part of the farm is now wet. That's the one going towards the ridge. Here's the second pond down. This when it fills up, I've designed the system as an overflow system. If we build a dam and elevate water above grade, we have to have engineers design it, we have to have a licensed contractor install it, and then we have to register it with the Register of Deeds and maintain it as a licensed registered wetland in perpetuity and get extra insurance on it in case your 4-year-old child falls in and drowns. I don't want to do that. That's expensive and it's stupid. However, I can go and I can dig a hole in the ground to generate some fill to go fill in a low spot somewhere else, and coincidentally, water falls into it. Cool. Well, when this fills up, then it overflows through these swales on either side, and this goes down the ridge that way, this goes down the ridge. You kind of see where this one comes out and around that way. If we use these for watering, if you're going to be grazing in this alley here, they can water here. You graze in this alley, they water here. So we got 4 alleys can water from this point. And the same with this one. They get 4 alleys that can water from that point. If our ponds lower down run out of water, we can simply siphon. You drop a hose in here, put your thumb over the end of it, walk it down, and drop it in here. You can siphon everything full. You can actually run a siphon this way and run drip irrigation. So it's an amazing gravity feed system. We don't need through pipes. One of the issues with through pipes in a climate like mine, when it gets to 40 below Celsius, is they freeze, they crack, they break, and they'll crack the dam, and you get leakage along the edge, especially because of the freezing and thawing. So then you can see the pond below. It spreads that way and this way. Notice, where's the overflow going down the valley? There's not even any evidence of the matted grass going down the valley. We've captured this water and spread it out and soaked it in. Actually, the top pond, this is now the middle one here, the top pond, it all soaked in before it even got to the ridge, to the level ridge. So here's the third one down, spills that way, through a swale, and then it goes this way through a swale, out to the ridge. There's the third one down below. Now on the third one, I don't even notice it in this picture. This one spilled to the left. On the third one, there was a low spot where it started to bleed across. And there's going to the left. Here it is, right over here. And what this was is where I was driving over repeatedly. And what happens on slopes is naturally the soil will creep. It just slowly moves downhill over time, especially when you add water to it. And what's happened quite often is over the years, as these ponds have sat there, everything goes out of adjustment just ever so slightly. And so when there's a big rain event, I go out and check it. I feel and say, okay, I got to go fix this. So now I know that next time I'm just going to come in, scoop a little dirt here, fill that in, problem solved. And the water will continue to flow out there and there'll be no overflow. This is what's happening in the main valley where the pipes are coming through across the road. Now look at this. Here's the neighbor's field, flows onto my property, makes this river. This was 65 feet across and about 2 feet deep. Here's the water coming off of my fields. Nothing except for the blowout in the bottom. You see that bottom swale. And that bottom pond, that little blowout caused this. We have like a little 100 feet of trickly water coming across. 100 linear feet is maybe 2 feet wide. That right there is the first overland water flow from my system in 21 years. And I'm actually proud of that, is the fact that we have not let this happen on the watershed that we have full management authority over. And hopefully pretty soon we'll get this one, I'll get the equipment, I'll start doing the work up in the headlands there. So this is what that uncontrolled water flow does. Head cuts. Here's just another view. No water coming down this valley. We got water coming from that 80-acre field and this 80-acre field. Now I'm walking up the ridge. I'm going to quickly go here again. So what I showed you is this valley here was the one with the ponds and the swales. It split it out. It was that lowest pond down here. There's a little bit of a bleed, so there's a little bit of overland flow there. And then coming down from this pipe, and there's a torrent coming down from that pipe that goes through this woods, and this is where the head cutting was, all the erosion. My property, the erosion on my property is caused by their water not being managed on their property and forcing me to manage their water on my property at great expense. So back here, now I'm going, oops, I'll go back here just to show you. So then after here, I walked around the corner and then up this ridge. And this ridge is where these swales from those same ponds in this valley come up to the ridge, and then they go across this way. Then it comes across this way, and then this one goes from here, comes out that way. That's what we're going to do next. So this looks all the way back up at a 1% slope to the lower pond in that valley. This is as it's going out to the ridge, and then starting here, there's a driver cross or crossing. So it's shallow in, shallow out. It still has the swale and berm, so the water still gets conveyed. And then from this point over, it's on the ridge, and it all sheets in that direction and waters the trees are out on the edge of the ridge. These trees are in maybe 2 inches of soil on rock. They're growing in almost solid rock, but they've got plenty of water because it just keeps sheeting over them year after year. This is the level sill in action. I want to see this water just squish, squish, squish on the ground instead of a flow causing head cuts and erosion. It's just a sheet that causes the worms and all the woodchucks and ground squirrels to come up for air. This is the second swale that goes up to the second pond. That water would have gone roar. Instead, it comes out here and around the corner. And here's the crossing where it's shallow in, drive across. And then it goes out across the ridge, and this is a level sill off to the left. So this just fills up and it weeps through that soil. It's no longer a torrent. The water moves until it gets to this point. It fills up. It's a long, horizontal, perfectly level puddle. This deep. It's, 2/3 of the way up my boot. So that's how deep it is there. And it still has, on this one, it's got another 6 or 8 inches to go before it goes over the berm. So this is just filling up and soaking in. It's not even overflowing yet. That's the second swale, different view. Here's the top swale that comes from the key point, which actually is a key point in the landscape. And it comes around this way, around that way. This is the one that drops, that was really lasered in. Now here's a place where the cows mucked up the crossing, where you drive the tractor over this way and drive over that way. That's where all the drive overs are, crossings. I want to scoop this out a little bit, clean it up, but the water still was moving. And this is the one that the water wasn't even making it out to the level sill. This is all the level area that sheets it across the ridge that away. And I stood around here. Maybe you can see it. Watch this. I don't see it. There was a hole, and it wasn't draining like a bathtub drain. It was bubbling, and the water was going down this hole, making this funny sucking and bubbling sound. Oftentimes you'll have chipmunk holes or woodchuck holes that the water will just come roaring out here, just down the bathtub drain. And the animals are, of course, in these little safety air pockets, and all their channels fill up, and so they're getting a deep irrigation of the land under here. So you combine on the ridge. This is the driest, stoniest, rockiest soil on the ridge, and now it's getting the equivalent of 3 times the average rainfall that it usually would get. And we have a perennial ground cover, putting the roots down deep. Animals making tunnels so that water can infiltrate. Once a year, I'll go through and I'll drive the subsoiler in parallel to all these systems so the water can all soak in. All of that extra water, the organic matter, this is now a biological sponge. Look at the lush green that we have up on a stony, dry ridge. Here's another ridge. This is, if we look at this picture right here, this is right at that spot there. So the very top of this hill, this is where my wind turbine stands. Instead of the water flowing down this way into that valley, or down that way to that valley, it bumps into this swale right here, comes out here, and it puddles here. This today was completely full of water. The foxtail grass that was left behind after the rye crop was harvested was above it. You couldn't see how much water was in it until you actually stood in it. It's amazing to me that on one of the highest pieces of the parts of the property, one of the highest ridges, I've got maybe 1/10 of an acre pond. Look at all that water out here. I could grow wild rice. I want to dig a pond out there. This is that same spot looking downslope. This is the level sill. So this pond fills all the way over here, and there's water all the way up to this rim, and it's oozing through this green in the background, which is asparagus. So it's a perennial system. Chestnuts, asparagus, and grazing, and this was cereal rye and yellow sweet clover. We got a lot of honey from the clover, all with the water management. Where's the plow? Where's the erosion that we saw in some of those bigger ag fields? We sell wholesale. We're selling wholesale commodities, and that's how deep the pond is in many places. I wonder if we'll get some ducks pretty soon. We did have a minor blow up, one of my roads that goes down to the house. See this little mini swale that crosses the road? If you're going to have a driveway or a road that is going down slope because you got to get to where you got to get to, every once in a while, just put this little diagonal cut. Just drag a 2-bottom, 1-bottom plow, or use a shovel or something. You just have it go diagonally across. Make it gentle in, gentle out, so you can drive across in a Volkswagen Jetta. But there was so much rain that happened, it filled this up, and so it eroded to pieces. This is the only, right here, ladies and gentlemen, that's the only erosion damage on my farm caused by almost a foot of rain overnight. This is the main pig paddock right here. We're keeping pigs mostly. This is this section right in here, this green section. So this is 80 acres worth of water, 1 foot deep, comes through the fence right here, 10 feet wide, and who knows how deep, roaring through here. Well, I put a curved berm, like this reverse, it's the same shape as this, but it's a berm with the swale on the downhill side, because that's where I got the dirt from. And what it was is this narrow channel, 10 feet wide, hits this spreader berm, and it spreads it out till it's 160 feet wide. And so if you do the math on taking the shape, if it's 10 feet wide and however deep it is, then you spread it out 160 feet wide. It's now 160 times shallower. So you take this stream channel, boom, it hits this reverse herringbone thing, and it spreads it out. Then it comes across in a sheet. So we've slowed down that erosive force dramatically reduced the scour. It's at this point when I get the bulldozers, I'm going to put a swale berm system here and pick up this water and start moving it across the hill that way. Pick it up and start moving it across the hill that way. Haven't done that yet. That's where the stream came through on the neighbor's property. This is the berm. I planted all kinds of willow trees on it. They love the water. Their roots help to hold it together. And on the downhill side is where the pond is here instead of on the uphill side. And then you can see here all the way across the pig paddock, this big, huge sheet of water. I had to whistle them in this afternoon. When I left, there were still 2 of them missing. Downstream, no doubt their fence blew out, so I'm going to leave it blown out, give them an opportunity to come back home on their own. And so then once it goes back down into the woods, the shape of the land concentrates it, and you can see it goes from that, out here it's probably 200 feet wide. It was like a lake. The first time I've ever seen this part was a lake, 4 o'clock in the morning, and I couldn't take a picture. Then it narrows up again and starts to roar. Now we've seen some of these pictures a couple of weeks ago, because down in here there was a brush gabion that I built. Put all kinds of brush and debris catcher just to filter this, catch a little debris, slow the water down as it's roaring downstream. This brush gabion that's down there is gone, absolutely evaporated. It's washed away. Here's another one of my little pocket ponds. It also filled up, had a blowout. This is probably 40 to 50 feet wide, 3 or 4 feet deep. It topped off and it eroded most of the grass away here and washed downstream. See the bent grasses that show the water moving away. It also topped off and washed out over that way. This is in that main valley again, not coming from there, but coming from here. It narrows up and roars down through. That little pond that topped over was over in here. It came this way. So can you notice, is there a difference between this and that barn that we saw underwater? There's a dramatic difference. I've got a little bit of grass missing. I've got a little bit of a ditch missing in the gravel, and I've got all of this water soaking in to water my trees. And I was telling a couple on my farm this summer that I have enough water to last next year. My soil is so hydrated that if we have a total drought next year, I'll make it because it's all stored in. Now, you guys have seen this picture last 2 weeks ago. Because this is where I showed, some debris deposition, sediment deposition from flood flow. That was when we had the mere 5.5-inch trivial little rainfall. Look at the grass matted down here, and then look at the scouring that happened over here. This was probably about 6 feet deep and only about 20 feet wide. This raging torrent. Anytime you see like the Niagara Falls here, it slowly carves its way, moves its way upstream. This is a crossing where I cross that main valley, and I repeatedly have filled this in. Here I've got the situation, just like the road crew does, by keep filling this in next to the culvert or whatever, they're doing it next to a culvert, I'm not solving the problem. I've got to manage that 120 acres of water upstream, or else this problem will never go away. I know how to do it on my property. Why don't I go ahead and rent that bulldozer and manage this property? This problem will go away. Flash floods will go away. New Orleans is underwater. We really can't solve that problem, but we sure can prevent flooding going down the Mississippi, the Ohio, the Missouri River if we manage the water high up in the watershed, catch it, spread it out, slow it down, soak it in, hydrate our landscape, minimize the irrigation we need in the uplands, prevent erosion in the uplands, and oh my goodness, prevent erosion and road damage. There's 2 different towns along the Kickapoo River. This flows into Camp Creek, which flows in the Kickapoo River. 2 different towns that have had to get federal money, and they've finally moved their towns out of the river floodplain. So you guys saw this exact picture 2 weeks ago. Had the remains of a brush gabion across here, and there was this nice dark brown silt that had been deposited, and some silt came through. Look at the boulders that were exposed this time. I think I'm going to go look for some arrowheads there. Just amazing scouring, fast. It just happened within a matter of hours. These are some little pocket ponds going up Primary Valley in a wooded area, and this is the first time ever that this one's filled up and then overflowing. You see the matted grass, and then it flowed down that way. Continued to go uphill. This one filled up, overflowed, and it went out that way. I thought I was being cute because I made it overflow this way, then that one overflows that way, and they zigzag back and forth. And guess what? That's the last one that I have. Now what I want you guys to do is remember some of those earlier slides. Then look at this farm and look at how minimal the flooding damage was. I'm going to blow through some of these pictures. Part of our success is also using a subsoiler, a hook. You drag it through the ground. You can get one of these things for $200 online. King Cutter, K-I-N-G-K-U-T-T-E-R. Cuts a slot in the ground, there's very little surface disturbance. Or you can get one of these online, $8,500, $10,000, then plus shipping freight from Australia. Your choice. As your soil gets richer, so do you, unless you buy one of these. That's all you're doing is going to cut some slots in the ground, let that water infiltrate, soak it in deep, get the root matter growing. That's my yeoman's plow. I actually do have one. Long story, I'll tell that once upon a time. It's said that you need 25 horsepower per shank on a yeoman's plow. I do it with a 40 horsepower tractor pulling 2 shanks. The reason why I can get away with that is I've had 20 years of soil development using a single shank subsoil. I've got red clay that's a nice brown topsoil. I can pull a 2 shank subsoiler with a 15-year-old 40 horsepower tractor. This is what all of the fields looked like earlier in the spring. See just how the leaves are just emerging? So then as I get all these rains, it all soaks down there. You really do want to combine planting perennial grasses in with your subsoiler because you need to have those roots injecting themselves into that crack and keeping that soil inflated. If you're just doing this like in an annual crop field and you don't have extensive cover crops or perennial covers in it, there's actually research out there showing that you can cause soil collapse because you're not putting enough organic matter into the soil. The best way to put in organic matter is perennials. Grasses, super dense fibrous roots, tap-rooted plants like daikon, tillage radish, or like what I have is yellow sweet clover, and then of course your long-term gain is with your trees. Just think of the carbon that I've stored on this site. A couple weeks ago I did the calculation. What was it? 80,000 tons of carbon I've got stored just in the roots of hybrid poplars on my property alone. This is that pond out on the ridge that I was telling you about. This is where all the water will flow not only on the swale system, but it also flows in these channels when you get a real good rain flowing. You can combine it with a tank for biologicals, a seeder for dropping seeds, and as the years go on and these roots penetrate deeper and deeper and deeper, you'll get more organic matter accumulated. The topsoil gets thicker. This is a photo I got from Darren. Ben Falk has also used that. Here's my farm. This is the water movement before we ever did any patterning and any terraces. The water would flow down the valleys, concentrate, and zip away. And then afterwards, I haven't set this up yet because I don't have the time, but there you have it. I just wanted to show you guys. We're supposed to talk about fire adaptations. Today was just not a fire day out on the farm. This was an absolute water day. And when you do a water management pattern like this on your farm, this will help to drought-proof your farm because all of that water is soaking into the soil. It's now a part of the biology. The trees have it in every single cell of their body. The roots of the trees and the grasses have it down in them. The organic matter alone in the soil, every 1% increase, an extra 27,000, 3 swimming pools worth of extra, 3 extra swimming pools worth of water on that one piece of ground right there, just because we've turned the soil from red clay into black topsoil. This is how we long-term drought-proof our farm. And when it rains like mad today, we have a little bit of squishy ground. This is where the little bit of erosion was on my road. And as long as we can manage our inflows from other properties, this one here and that one here, and of course this one here, we have an almost drought-proof farm. And if I manage this water, this water, this water, this water on my farm, I've tripled the amount of rainfall that actually is usable on this property. Now that's how you can get some yields. And that's it for tonight. We've gone way overboard. I thank you for your patience for being here. I still see there are at least a couple of people. So nice.
One person left and that one came in. This is amazing. But everybody, you got an amazing picture. Oh, shoot, my microphone was muted. I said one person is all that's left, Mark. This was amazing. We got nice little comments. There's Rock. Put in a 1 in there if you guys like this.
It's not that one person is